Kimadvayam Nirgunam Nityamadvayam without any material thing. Kevalam, pure and perfect. Jnanam, knowledge. Pratyak, all pervading. Samyak, in fullness. Avastitham, situated. Satyam, truth. Purnam, absolute. Anadi, Nirgunam, devoid of material modes. Nityam, eternal. Advayam, without any rival. Rishi, O Narada, O great sage. Vedanti, they can only understand. Munayaha, the great thinkers. Prashanta, pacified. Atma, self. Indriya, senses. Ashayaha, sheltered. Yada, while. Tat, that. Eva, certainly. Asat, untenable. Tarkaihi, arguments. Tiradhiyeta, disappears. Vliplutam, distorted. So there's actually two verses here. The second verse is Rishe Vidandi Munaya Prashanatmendriya Shayaha Yudatad Eva Satkarais Tarkais Tirodhiyeta Viplutam. Translation. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Personality of Godhead is pure, being free from all contaminations of material tinges. He is the absolute truth and the embodiment of full and perfect knowledge. He is all-pervading, without beginning or end, and without rival. O Narada, O great sage, the great thinkers can know him when completely freed from all material hankerings and when sheltered under undisturbed conditions of the senses. Otherwise, by untenable arguments, all is distorted and the Lord disappears from our sight. Purport. Here is an estimation of the Lord apart from his transcendental activities in the temporary material creations. Mayavada philosophy tries to designate the Lord as contaminated by a material body when he accepts forms of incarnation. This sort of interpolation is completely denied herein by the explanation that the Lord's position is pure and unalloyed in all circumstances. According to Mayavada philosophy, the spirit soul, when covered by nescience, is designated as jiva. When freed from such ignorance or nescience, he merges in the impersonal existence of the absolute truth. But here it is said that the Lord is eternally the symbol of full and perfect knowledge. This is his speciality, perpetual freedom from all material contaminations. This distinguishes the Lord from the individual common living entities who have the aptitude for being subordinated by nescience and thus becoming materially designated. In the Vedas, it is said that the Lord is Vijnanam Anandam, full of bliss and knowledge. The conditioned souls are never to be compared to him because such individual souls have the tendency to become contaminated. Although after liberation, the living entity can become one with the same quality of existence as the Lord, his very tendency to become contaminated, which the Lord never has, makes the individual living entity different from the Lord. In the Vedas, it is said, Shuddham apapa vedham, the individual Atma becomes polluted by sin, but the Lord is never contaminated by sins. The Lord is compared to the powerful sun. The sun is never contaminated by anything infectious because it is so powerful. On the contrary, infected things are sterilized by the rays of the sun. Similarly, the Lord is never contaminated by sins. On the contrary, the sinful living entities become sterilized by contact with the Lord. This means that the Lord is also all-pervading like the sun, and as such, the word pratyak is used in this verse. Nothing is excluded from the existence of the Lord's potential expansions. The Lord is within everything, and he is all-covering also, without being disturbed by the activities of the individual souls. He is therefore infinite, and the living entities are infinitesimal. In the Vedas, it is said that only the Lord alone exists, and all others' existences depend on him. He is the generating reservoir for everyone's existential capacity. He is the supreme truth of all other categorical truths. He is the source of everyone's opulence, and therefore no one can equal him in opulence. Being full of all opulences, namely wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, certainly he is the supreme person. And because he is a person, he has many personal qualities, although he is transcendental to the material modes. We have already discussed the statement, Ithang Bhuta Guno Harihi, Bhagavatam 1.7.10. His transcendental qualities are so attractive that even the liberated souls, Atma Ramas, are also attracted by them. Although possessed of all personal qualities, he is nevertheless omnipotent. Therefore, personally, he has nothing to do, for everything is being carried out by his omnipotent energies. Acha. This suggests his specific spiritual form, which can never be experienced by the material senses. He can be seen only when the senses are purified by devotional service. Yam evaisha vrinute tena labhyaha. As such, There are basic differences between the Lord and the living entities in so many respects. No one can be compared to the Lord, as the Vedas declare, Ekam eva dvitiyam brahma dvaitar vai bhayang bhavati. The Lord has no competitor, and he has nothing to fear from any other being, nor can anyone be equal to him. Although he is the root of all other beings, there are basic differences between him and other beings. Otherwise, there would have been no necessity for the statement in the previous verse that no one can know him 100% as he is. Nayang vidanti tatvena. That no one can fully understand him. Is explained also in this verse. But the qualification for understanding to some degree is mentioned here. The reason is that the devotees have no demands in their lives but to be obedient servants of the Lord, while all others, namely the empiric philosophers, the mystics, and the fruitive workers, all basically have some demand and as such cannot be pacified. They cannot be pacified. The fruitive work as long as there is a demand. The whole matter becomes distorted. Understanding is ultimate food, there's no reason. Because in the Bhagavad Gita 7.28, Yesham Dvanandagatam Papam Jnanam Punyakarmanam Te Dvandva Moha Nirmukta Bhajate Mam Dridha Vrataha. Vishuddham kevalam jnanam pratyaksam yagavasthitam satyam bhurnam anadhyantam nirgunam nityam advayam Rishi vidanti munaya prashantatmendriyashayaha yada tad eva satkarkais tirodhiyeta viplutam. Translation. The personality of Godhead is pure, being free from all contaminations of material tingers. He is the absolute truth and the embodiment of full and perfect knowledge. He is all-pervading, without beginning or end, and without rival. O Narada, O great sage, the great thinkers can know him when completely freed from all material hankerings and when sheltered under undisturbed conditions of the senses. Otherwise, by untenable arguments, all is distorted, and the Lord disappears from our sight. We would love to hear from you, Maharaj.
Has to be again said again and again that living entities can never equal the Lord in all respects. Because my bodies, I always say that. I always say living entity Real synthesis. And that's hinted here or stated quite clearly, Amalatmana, pure souls, Prashantatma, those who are perfectly peaceful. And the devotees are the only ones who are perfectly peaceful because they have no desires to be fulfilled. They have no demands. The karmis want fruit of results. The Gyanis want to merge into the Supreme, become God. And the yogis want mystic powers. But the Vaishnavas, the devotees are satisfied, peaceful in all circumstances. They don't have anything to demand from the Lord. They just would like to humbly be engaged in the service of the Lord's servants. And that is the most pleasing to the Lord. Therefore, he reveals everything to them. Whereas the impersonalists, they don't get such complete knowledge, just partial.
Your comments put me in mind of the fourth verse of the Shikshashtaka, na janam, na dhanam, na sundarim, kavita va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani, janmanishvare, bhavatad bhaktira haituki tayi. So the devotee is interested in this bhavatad, this, he wants to experience or he wants to receive this haituki, devotional service, bhaktiya haituki, this unto you, Tvai. So the devotee is satisfied only with becoming the servant of the servant of the servants of the Lord. That's his only desire, and that's the desire which the Lord desires for the living entities, and he knows that that will be the best thing for them, actually, too. So in this prayer, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually instructing that we're not interested in anything material, even up to liberation, which is also a material desire. That's kind of, an interesting point, but we're actually interested to become free from the material sufferings. So because there's no bhakti, there's no love there, actually, it's just a self-interested desire to become the greatest, according to our limited perception of the greatest. So if we want to merge into the absolute truth, then we don't understand that the Lord is actually a person and there's a relationship waiting for us that we're ignoring. And actually, our desire is to become God, and that's because we don't have knowledge of the personal form of the Lord, then it's contaminated knowledge. So everything becomes distorted. Krishna declares in the Bhagavad Gita that Mogha Sha Mogha Karma Mogha Jnana Vichetasaha, that all the hopes for, in that contaminated condition, all the hopes for fruitive activities, the knowledge for liberation, all these things, they're baffled. Mogha Sha. These are hopes for being liberated are actually baffled. Right? So there's a difference between the Lord and the living entities, and that is corroborated all over the Vedic literatures, as we saw in the purport from Prabhupada. Prabhupada made so many different comments or references to the Lord's being in a whole different category from the individual living entities. Mars was mentioning that the Mayavadas, they think that Mayavadis, they think that the jiva or the spirit soul is designated as jiva when he's covered by ignorance, but they think that actually he's the absolute truth in full, just in a contaminated, covered position. But there's no logic to that. How can the full absolute truth become contaminated or covered? That would mean that the covering is actually greater than the absolute truth. So it doesn't actually check out. So there's no really explaining the beginning of their whole story, and therefore we can understand that it's more or less a type of a speculation. And the whole point is to actually enjoy sense gratification. The Mayavad philosophy was propagated by Shankaracharya, and it was the improper conclusions or improper commentaries given on the Vedanta Sutra. So the Vedanta Sutra, Vedanta, we were hearing a few texts before. Vedanta actually means to understand our identity as spirit soul and the Lord's identity. The Vedanta Sutra actually more or less begins with this janmad yasya yataha, that everything is coming from this, but it's everything from whom everything is actually emanating, right? So that's the main thing, is that the Shankarites or the Mayavad philosophy, the Mayavada school of philosophers, they attribute, they think that everything is coming from the impersonal energy of the Lord, whereas the personalists understand that the Vedic literature is actually describing from whom the everything is emanating. So that's the real understanding of Vedanta. And when you understand that there's somebody that is unlimitedly greater than yourself, if we understand that there's some supreme person with all attractive opulences, wealth, beauty, fame, renunciation, power, and knowledge, then naturally we will want to render loving devotional service. And that's stated in the Bhagavad Gita too, that everything is coming from me. Krishna describes in chapter 10, text 8, that everything is coming from me, and the wise who know this perfectly engage in my devotional service with all their hearts. So when we understand the Lord in full, then this is sambandha jnana. This is the knowledge of the relationship or our identity in comparison to the Lord's identity. Self-realization, Prabhupada describes. Self-realization means understand the Lord, understand ourselves, and understand our relationship with the Lord. They happen simultaneously. And the example is given that if you're in a place without electricity, and you don't have access to fire, then you can only see yourself when you look in the reflection on the water, on the surface of the clear or the still water. And you can only see that reflection when the sun is in the sky. Right? There's no other way to get a light source. Otherwise, the surface of the water has no illumination. There's no illumination which is reflecting off of your face into the water. So it's all black. There's no reflection there. But you can see yourself when there's light in the sky. So you understand yourself when you see the sun. And similarly, you see the sun when you can see yourself. So these things happen at the same time. Self-realization includes understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. as the supreme being and understanding ourselves as the infinitesimal, eternal servants of the servants of the servants of the Lord. So those are some points. And do we have some discussion? Okay.
Hare Krishna. I like this point you were just sharing about the sun. And Prabhupada says this really nice example in the purport also about how the sun can sterilize different things by shining onto it. And then I like how Prabhupada said that the living entity can become sterilized by contact with the Lord as well. And just also as we're talking about the sun, I never thought about it this way of like, we cannot fully understand ourselves without trying to understand that there's a supreme, that there's a Lord. And so, there's that misconception that, I'm looking for self-realization. I'm looking for myself. And then that's the missing piece, is understanding that God exists. There's a supreme that created me. And if I just know and inquire from that person, then I can know who I am. But so many of us, at least including myself, like I tried so hard to just seek in other ways, trying to figure out like through speculation, what am I? Why am I here? Who am I? What's my purpose? And made up all these different things from collecting from different books and people who are also speculating. So it's really nice that Prabhupada makes it really clear for us that, if you just try to understand the Lord through a spiritual master, through the devotees, through the scripture, then you can understand yourself. At least this is what I'm hearing from your class today. Thank you.
Yeah, when we, our endeavor to understand ourselves and understand this universe and more or less become peaceful and satisfied and happy, right? Because we're trying to find our own selves so we know how to satisfy ourselves better. We've been going around trying to satisfy ourselves and we're thinking, I don't even know who I am. So what am I wasting all my time for? I don't even know how to be happy. Who am I? Then we think, okay, if once I know who I am, then I can know how to help myself or solve my problems or to be happy and satisfied. But we can be fully in knowledge of ourselves and we can be happy and satisfied by becoming free from all of our material desires and replacing them or simultaneously cultivating the spiritual desires, which are natural to the soul. So actually they happen together. The diminution of material desires means the cultivation of spiritual desires. And actually that only happens in devotional service. That's the only way to become actually clean in heart. It's stated that the so-called Mayavad gurus failed to purify the hearts of their disciples because actually it's just a negation of material, but there's no addition of spiritual. So actually the negation of material is actually less just a front. It's actually it's just a pretender status. We may say that we don't want to do karmas or we may not want to engage with this material world, but actually those desires are in the heart. They don't become eradicated from remaining silent. It doesn't become eradicated from doing impersonal meditation. They are there, and actually they carry that living entity to contaminated statuses of life. Now, what's interesting is that the Lord is merciful, so he may let them merge or think that they're merged for some short period of time, but actually they're not. So to get back to the point that you were touching on, Mataji, is that, yes, we switch our motivation, and all of our goals are met. If we switch our motive operandi, we say, I will serve the Lord with all of myself at all times, under all circumstances, with the best of my ability. I just want to bring him pleasure through serving his servants. And then automatically we understand ourselves in full, then we understand everything in full, and we can be happy and satisfied. So it's the one switch that can turn all the lights on everywhere. Is this devotional service, and that's being stressed here. So, thank you. Did you have something else, Mataji?
I had a question. I was speaking to someone recently about envy, and it was someone that isn't practicing bhakti, and they said, "Oh, this is something you're working on, so you must know about envy." And I said, "Yeah." Initially I asked her, I said, "Do you know the difference between envy and jealousy?" And she said, "I don't know. Aren't they the same thing?" And so she kind of made it seem through our conversation that she doesn't have to deal with that. So I was wondering, can someone be freed from envy, jealousy, lust, greed, these I guess we can call like anarthas or dirt in the heart, without practicing bhakti? Is it possible for some people to just be free from some of those things?
No. It's not possible. Actually, it's silly to think so, because this body is a symptom of sin. If we're in this material world, that means that, our hearts are very dirty, and we have acted in ways which have led us to receive this gift from material nature in order to continually satisfy our improper desires. So those improper desires are there, and it's all stemming from this lust and this envy for the Lord. And, it's often, we see often, even nice, innocent new devotees may tell us that, no, I don't have any sex desire. I don't have any lust. I can chat with them. I can talk with them. I can do this. And it's a pretty hard point. Actually, because we have this material body, that means that it's the biggest enemy it's really tough. We're really in this dirty situation. So to think ourselves clean without having entered the shower is, basically the point I'm trying to make is, because we're in this material world, we're by definition very contaminated. So without having entered the shower, there's no question of being cleansed. Right? So that's that situation. So we may not think that we have it really bad, but when we really start cleaning the heart, we really start cleaning the room, we'll see how dirty our heart is. And that's what's really nice about Sadhu Sangha, is devotees are helping us deal with our things, and we're helping other devotees deal with their things. And essentially that means, realizing we're not the controller, we're not the enjoyer. It's not, things don't have to go my way exactly every time, all the time. They should go the Lord's way. And sometimes I know what that is, and sometimes I don't. So that's the wonderful, purifying nature of Sadhu Sangha. And, also another thing is if somebody is sometimes the devotee's humility is taken as a type of a weakness by the non-devotee, and they say when we're being humble with them and we're speaking Vaishnav language, we're saying, yeah, I'm so contaminated, I'm just a rascal. They're thinking, that seems interesting, I'm doing great. Why would I want to join that? Because I'm doing great. Now she joined that. Now she's all bummed out. She's dealing with lust. So they're all confused. So sometimes we don't reveal our mind to them. And actually sometimes we reveal our mind and then they may take it the wrong way because they're actually envious. If they were not envious, then they would actually feel some compassion and try to assist us or whatever. But sometimes they say, yes, see, I knew I was better than you. It's very subtle, and I don't mean to go on, but we can see some of the subtleties or the little intricacies to this lust and envy. So thank you very much. Please pardon me for any incorrect statements and any personal lack of tact or discretion. Please do forgive me. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam.